Hello, everyone. Today is Tuesday, September 29th. As always, I'm your host for Collectibles and Coffee, Edward Nguyen. Today, I had a viewer comment. They said they enjoyed the content, which I do appreciate. And they had kind of asked some questions. They were wondering about taxes, what it means, what you owe on taxes as a business, and just kind of some of the more logistical sides of the business, especially when you do start one up, how to get going, what an LLC is. Today, I'll kind of go through and answer those questions. As a disclaimer, it is important to note that if you are looking to start a business or you are already a business, you should seek the advice of a tax professional, a professional accountant. What I'm saying here is not to be construed as financial advice, is not accounting advice. This is simply giving you a very rough outline on how to get started. If you need more details, if you don't understand something, do your research. Make sure that you're doing things correctly. Ask questions to your accountant. Ask questions to the people that are licensed professionals whose job it is to answer these questions for you. That's kind of my disclaimer before we start. So today, kind of answering some of these basic questions, kind of going through how I do things and what works for me. Again, it is important to note, seek the advice of a licensed professional. This is all merely my perspective, my opinion. A lot of these may not apply to you, may work differently for you. Seek the advice of a tax professional. Also, I had some questions come through yesterday. People were wondering more about Legos, if that was something I could speak a bit more to. I didn't really do it justice yesterday. I touched on it very, very briefly. Today, kind of go through again, and we'll kind of go through again. I'll talk a bit more about it, why I choose not to do it, and kind of dispel some of the questions, get a bit more insight for people into Legos and investing for the people who choose to operate on that front. That being said, there's a lot. Let's hop right into it. So, taxes, it's a T word. It kind of sucks, right? This is the reality of the situation. We all have to pay our taxes. This is the reality of life, right? Saying goes, there's only two things that are certain in life: death and taxes. It is unfortunate, but it is something that I have come to terms with. Paying taxes, it's simply a part of being an operating member of society. We all have to do our fair share. I've been lucky, I've been successful. I'm okay paying my share of my taxes. I think that's important. That's being a functioning member of society. It's important that I do what I can, having been as successful as I have been, to pay my taxes and do everything by the book and doing things correctly. Again, what I'm about to say here, seek the advice of a licensed tax professional, an accountant, someone who is paid to do these things, paid to give you professional advice. The things that apply here may not necessarily apply to you. So make sure you're doing your research. These are things that you do not want to mess up. Being audited by the IRS is something that I've had the fortune of never going through. I hope I never have to go through. Again, I'm very keen on doing things by the book, keeping things as accurate as possible. That way, one, you can avoid being audited if you just keep everything in order, doing things properly. And realistically, it does help you. It's important to keep things in order. Organizing is important. Being able to keep all your ducks in a row is important because it really gives you a better understanding of how profitable you are, of if what you're doing makes sense for you in terms of time equity. I know I've encountered store owners before that simply got out of the business because what they were doing wasn't worth their time. People have written about this. Gary Ray, he's written a book. It's called, I don't have the book in front of me. Let me pull it up here. The premise is that what you're doing, you want to make sure that it's worth your time. You feel like it's worth your time. When you factor in taxes, it's a unfortunate reality, but at the end of the day, a lot of people seem to think that small business owners, game stores, they're making money hand over fist. That's not the case. Once you start factoring things that most people don't think about, when I did an interview with Rusty Hunt, owner of Next Ridge Games, a few weeks back, he kind of touched on this. If you're looking at this from a pure monetary point, just how much money you're bringing in, if your goal is simply finance motivated, you're just looking to make as much money as possible. Realistically, most people who have the means and intelligence to do this are probably better off doing something else to maximize their time equity. I just looked up the book by Gary Ray. He owns a game store in Northern California. His book, Friendly Local Game Store, A 5-Year Path to a Middle Class Income. This book, I've read it. It's very, very good. For anyone who is thinking about making the transition, a lot of people seem to think that, oh, I'm here, I can hustle some cards, I have a TCG player account, I want to be looking at making the next step and turning this into a business, opening up a game store. Before you do so, I strongly, strongly, strongly advise you to read this book, even if you're not thinking about it, even if this is something that's even remotely on your radar, even if you're thinking about making this your full-time gig, read this book. It is a very, very, very strong dose of reality. A lot of people who do start up this business, I think if they had the chance to do it over again, most people probably would say that they wouldn't. You can only have so much love for the game. You can only have so much love for the business. There's upper limit to how far you can take that, because at the end of the day, when reality sets in and you need to pay your bills, you need to pay yourself, you need to be able to meet your basic needs, there are better ways to do so. Reading this book, Friendly Local Game Store, A 5-Year Path to Middle Class Income, does provide that dose of reality. It really makes you think about how hard it is to survive, how much time and energy it really takes to get going. Small businesses are in a tough spot right now, especially with the current world situation with the pandemic. A lot of small businesses are struggling. A lot of, just from personal experience, there have been a record amount of restaurants in the Portland metro area that have closed compared to the past years. The pandemic has hit a lot of people very hard. A lot of people are struggling as a result. A lot of small business owners, they've had their feet kind of swept out from underneath them with the nature of the pandemic. When Rusty was on a few weeks ago, he mentioned that his store was still closed. Speaking with him recently, with the way things are trending, it's likely that they will remain closed to the public for the remainder of the year. They'll be operating as an online-only store. A lot of stores kind of in the same boat. Stores that aren't opening to the public, they do have to kind of deal with this situation where they're trying to survive, but they're doing so with limited means. You can no longer count on events as a big way to draw a lot of people into your store, right? When you naturally have less foot traffic, if your store becomes a retail-only front, then you start to really struggle when you don't have that natural foot traffic coming into your store. That makes it a lot tougher, especially if you become a retail front only. Then you start having to deal more directly with online retailers, TCG Player, eBay, people who buy through Facebook, right? All these means start to become a real challenge for you as a small business owner. And if this is something you think about, right, make sure in terms of time equity, it makes sense to you. In terms of how you pursue this, taxes, just one more aspect that really cuts into your profits, because at the end of the day, we have to pay taxes on what we make. So looking a bit more into it, right, the first thing you should do is, if you're serious about making this step, is you should register yourself as a business, register yourself as an LLC, limited license company. What that means is that basically any profits are being passed directly to you. For most people that do own an LLC, they're going to be the only owner of it, right? You'll have employees, whatnot, but you'll be the sole owner. You'll be the only one that's on it. So any profit that your company makes will be added onto your taxes at the end of the year. That's the long and short of it. When you register for an LLC, you have to do so with your state. The amount that you pay varies from state to state. This is something that you do have to maintain as well. Usually there's a yearly upkeep fee. Sometimes the fee is higher up front. You pay more up front to register as an LLC, and then you pay a lower yearly upkeep on it. Some places there's no upkeep on it. It really varies from state to state. This would be the first step in registering yourself as a business. If you want to do anything that is business related, most places will ask for your LLC. Once you have that, you can register with the IRS. You can get EIN, employer identification number, also referred to as your tax ID. When you have this, in order for you to do things such as register for a business checking account with your bank, for example, you will need to have these things ready. So first step is registering for an LLC. This is saying that your company registered to you. You are able to separate your company from yourself. In the event that your company gets sued, for example, then that is separate from you. It keeps your finances completely separate. A lot of people seem to mix the two. This is something that's really dangerous. You want to be able to keep them separate. It helps with accounting, it helps with logistics, and it keeps you from mixing what should be business money, business assets, to what your money is and what your assets are. Keeping them separate is very important. An LLC is the first step to that. Most places you can look online on your state website, and it will more or less walk you through what you need in order to form your LLC. Again, this is something that no matter what you do, in order for you to properly register as a business, this is really the first step. This is something that is important that you should not neglect in doing. Make sure you do it correctly. And then this is something that you'll have to maintain year after year if you want to continue to operate your business. So with that, one of the most important things for you to do is to be able to keep your expenses straight. You want to make sure that you're doing things correctly in order to be able to write off against your taxes at the end of the year things that you spend money on. That's all tax write-off. Being able to do this keeps things from getting murky whenever you're buying merchandise, whenever you're buying inventory. That's something that you write off against at the end of the year against your profits. If you spend $10 on something, you sell it for $20, you only made $10. If you don't have that piece of account, if you don't have the piece of documentation that says I spent $10 on this, then when you go to pay your taxes, if you don't have a record of acquiring that, they're going to assume that your cost of acquisition was $0, and you'll be paying taxes on $20. That's a very simplified overview. Obviously, it's not quite as murky. It's not quite as clear as that, right? It gets a little bit murkier. There's a lot more, but being able to keep track of your inventory, being able to keep track of what your inventory costs, goes a long ways towards being able to deduct your expenses. Some other things that you want to do is when you have a separate checking account, right? After you open up your LLC, you go and open up a separate checking account. It keeps your finances completely separate. All that should be acquisitions. Anything that you spend money on needs to come from that bank account. It should not be coming from your personal account. Again, the idea is to keep yourselves completely separate, keep yourself completely divorced from your business. Your business should be entirely contained within your checking account. All financial information should be coming from your checking account itself. That needs to be kept very separate. This is something I can't stress enough. People who are mixing the two, when you start buying things yourself and trying to use it as a business expense, it starts to get very murky. When things get murky, this is how you get an audit. When there's there's any gaps, anything that doesn't quite line up, that's when you start creating problems for yourself. That's why you want to keep it completely separate, keep it very clear. Once you have that separate checking account, then you can start having your expenses as a tax write-off at the end of the year. So anything that is a business expense, anything that you incur as a cost of doing business, is something that you can write off. So most common thing is postage. For those of us that sell online as a TCG player outfit, eBay outfit, or whatever, we have to buy shipping supplies, envelopes, stamps, printers, label printers. All these things qualify as being a tax write-off. These are expensive. This is an expense. These things, you need them to operate your business. So there's no reason why you shouldn't be able to write them off on your taxes as a write-off at the end of the year, because it really does add up, right? For most of us, when we break down the cost of shipping one card out in a plain white envelope, right, we're looking at I mean, depending on how you get topplers now, most of the topplers I acquired at sub 6 cents. Obviously now, today's day and age, supply shortages, that's nowhere near the case. Topplers are more expensive now, but when you my costs break down roughly about 6 cents for a top loader, and then roughly a penny for envelope, penny sleeve, etc. All that kinds of adds up. Paper, ink, all that together, plus stamp, plus 55-cent stamp, right? You're looking at roughly just under 64 cents or so for all your supplies together. That's per order, right? When you ship out 1,000 orders, right, you can see how it starts to add up. And being able to deduct this against your taxes is really going to save you money at the end of the year. Other things that I write off: I have a business cell phone, I have a business hotspot. These are things that I carry with me. Being able to write off the entire phone bill is an expense as well. And that's something I write off. That's something that I use. If you have home internet that you use for your business, that you pay a premium on because you need to be able to use the internet speed, that's a write-off. If you rent out part of your house, or if you choose to rent out a location, that's a write-off. These are all things that you are able to write off, that you want to do so to be able to maximize your deductions at the end of the year. So that's really kind of the basic financials. There's obviously a lot more that goes into account. Sales tax is something that you do have to consider. This is one of the things that TCG does. eBay does this as well. Whenever you sell something on eBay, the buyer is charged sales tax, but eBay will automatically remit that sales tax. TCG Player is starting to do this as well. Depending on your state, you will have to remit the sales tax that you collect to your state. This is something that I would consult with your accountant with. They'll tell you how to properly do this, how often you should do this. Most businesses do this quarterly. Being able to do this is very important because when you collect sales tax, you have to be able to remit it as well. One of the things that kind of goes with being a retailer, a reseller, is that it allows you to qualify for being tax exempt. When you're purchasing something with the intention of resell, you're only supposed to be paying sales tax on it once, which is when an item is something that you sell, you're collecting sales tax on it as a business, and then you're remitting that to your state. When you're buying from another retailer, a distributor, or whatever, you should not be charged sales tax, because at that point you'd be charged sales tax twice. You're paying when you're buying the item, and then you're paying sales tax. You're remitting the sales tax quarterly to your state. Being tax exempt means that you don't pay sales tax to your distributor or wherever you go. This enables you to, in theory, reduce your cost of goods, as opposed to someone who doesn't have this luxury. People who operate individually, you do have to pay sales tax on your goods. Being tax exempt means that you basically get that money back. You can submit receipts saying that I paid sales tax on these items. These items were purchased with intent of resale. You get that amount of sales tax deducted at the end of the quarter or year or whatever. So that's another benefit of being a licensed business. People who aren't doing this, they basically aren't able to get that money back. They're basically just paying an extra 6, 8, 9% on top of their cost of buying these things when they have them for resale. So that's why registering as a business, it does allow you to be tax exempt, and you do kind of get that extra buffer when you're selling something. As for taxes that you owe at the end of the year, realistically, it comes down to what you're going to owe. Really comes down to how much you sell, how much you make. TCG Player, eBay, all these, at the end of the year, you'll get a tax form from them. You'll submit that to your account. You'll basically say these were sales that were done. This is how much, and they'll be able to tell you how much you owe. The more you sell, obviously, depending on which bracket you fall into, the more you'll owe. For the people that have a regular job and do this as a side hustle, then your incomes are added together. Whatever your regular job pays will will count, and then whatever you make from the side hustle, selling a TCG player, selling on eBay, whatever is added, your incomes are added together, and then that's how much you'll owe in taxes. It's really subjective. Seek your account if that's something you want to know. They'll give you an estimate on how much you should be owing at the end of the year based on your sales. I'm not really the one to answer that. Again, when you have any sort of doubt or question, consult with your accountant, consult with a licensed tax professional. They'll be the ones to give you a more precise answer. Some things that people have asked as well, PayPal. This is something that comes up fairly often as a business. I don't accept PayPal friends and family. I encourage that people don't as well. This is something that for whatever reason has been accepted in the culture, in buying and selling on Facebook, online. Friends and family, I think, is a pretty abhorrent service. I think that that's not something that should be used. In my mind, as a business, there's certainly no reasons why something should be sent or received as friends and family when you're clearly exchanging goods and services for this. The fees do suck. They're there for a reason. It's really no different than using any merchant service, Square, Chase. Chase is what I use. When you have these, all of them do come with a charge. That's the reality of operating a business. A lot of places that do have charges for using a credit card, we all have been there. We go into a business, you try and swipe your card, and they'll say, "Oh, you're charged an extra 3% or 4% or something." I think that's a pretty important business practice. I think businesses that do that should suffer. It is legal. There are states at the Supreme Court. It has been ruled that charging credit card surcharges is legal. That's something that they're allowed to do. However, there are states where this is not allowed. Check on your local jurisdiction. Make sure that you're doing things properly. A lot of small businesses do this. I'm not realizing the legality of it in the states where it's not legal. Be careful when you do so. There are different ways to get around it. For the most part, I would encourage that if you're going to charge fees, you should bake it into your costs of goods. Bake it as a business expense. If you're going to charge $10 for something, right, instead of charging the extra fee, the extra 3%, right, you should just be charging $11 or $10.50 for it to cover it. Again, I think it's a pretty important practice for businesses to be accepting goods and services, or to be accepting friends and family as payment. This is something that you also open up yourself to the possibility of being scammed. Almost every time you hear about a scam happening, of people getting ripped off, it's because they paid someone friends and services, and then that person chose to not deliver. At that point, you're kind of out of luck. That's the reality of it, right? If you're clearly sending money to a friend or a family member, you should trust them. PayPal very, very, very often will not side with you if that's the case. I know people have had luck going through their bank to try and get a chargeback to do so. That's a headache. That's a nightmare. That's a pain. That's not something I want to go through. Most of the times, instead of dealing with that headache, just be upfront about it. Just realize that whatever you're selling, right, you're going to lose the 2.9% plus 30 cents to collect that payment. This is something that you'll also report at the end of the year. Any sales that you make through PayPal should be reported once you have a certain number of transactions or you're above a certain threshold. PayPal will also send you a tax form, and then you'll submit that as earnings as well. Again, it kind of sucks. I wish that friends and family was a policy that that PayPal will move heavily away from. I think it's important for the security of the buyer to have that level of protection they receive when you have PayPal goods and services. That's why it's there. It's to protect the buyer. And then issue of them, if the issue is that you're a buyer and then you paid with goods and services and you receive something and the condition doesn't line up with what you had received, or there's any issues, there's any disputes, you're more likely to get a response from PayPal. You're more likely to be protected by PayPal's buyer protection policy if you paid with goods and services. That's really why it's there. That's intent. That's the spirit of that policy. Again, I frown very heavily on people that accept friends and family And I think it's very unprofessional. It's not business-like. That's not what a business that's properly operating should be doing. I actively avoid businesses that charge a credit card usage fee. I think, again, bake it into the cost of the item, raise your price a little bit to cover all your fees. Does it suck that you accept credit cards on a dollar sale? Yes, it does. But again, that's the reality situation. Having that convenience there is why is why credit cards are so convenient. That's why that they're accepted, right? This is the fee that we have to pay. This is just kind of the reality of it. So again, I don't accept friends and family. I would encourage that if you're serious about operating a business, that you don't accept friends and family for all social media transactions I do on Facebook or wherever. Everything is done via PayPal invoice. It's very, very simple. This is something I know sellers are starting to slowly starting to use. What that means is that you can go into PayPal. If you have someone gives you their PayPal email address, you write up the item. You say, I'm selling one booster box, one draft booster box of Zendikar Rising, right? You charge them an amount plus shipping or whatever, what have you, and you send it to them. They click on it, they pay, and then boom, you have a paper trail. It shows that the buyer is paying for one draft booster box of Zendikar Rising, and one draft booster box of Zendikar Rising is what they should receive. This is how both sides are covered. You do pay the exact same fee as goods and services. There's just a very definitive paper trail that goes on with it. That's why I use it. This is something I submit to my account. It's very, very clear. It's very precise. You know exactly what you should be sending. The buyer knows exactly what they should be receiving. They're paying directly through PayPal. That's why it's secure. That's one of the things that I think that as a seller, as a professional seller, if you intend to do this as a business, this is a reality of what you should do. So that's kind of my take on it. I don't doubt that people continue to use PayPal, friends and family. You do so at your own risk. If you get audited, I know people have lost their ability to send friends and family, period, from their PayPal as a result, which does become a pain when you're trying to use what friends and family was intended for, right? Sending money to your friends, you split a check at a restaurant or something, you didn't have the cash to cover, your friend covered you PayPal them amount. There will be a point when you will lose that ability to send friends and family. If you do get audited, PayPal does deem that you're abusing the friends and family policy and you're using it for goods and services transactions. So that's something to be careful of. In theory, if you open a business, you should have a completely separate PayPal. I don't own a personal PayPal anymore. There's no reason for me to use it. I only have a business PayPal that's tied directly to the business and the business checking. It's, again, completely separate from my own finances. It makes things easy. It makes things easy to track, and it keeps them completely separate. So those are kind of the major topics. One last thing that is kind of in a similar vein that do want to talk about when it comes to tracking your expenses and tracking your inventory that you purchase online. Insurance is something that is important. A lot of people ask about. People always wonder how to properly insure your collection, what it means to insure your collection, how you can guarantee it. It's something that is a little bit tough, is very, very tough for most conventional people, for people, especially people that don't have a business. As a business, you can usually have a policy that covers your inventory in the event that something happens to it. For individuals, it's much, much harder because you don't have that same level of accounting. I assume most people who buy things individually don't have the same level of accounting. It becomes much harder to, one, get an insurance policy for your collectibles, and two, in the event that something does happen, it becomes exceedingly difficult to collect on it. This is generally the same across the board. If you've ever shipped something expensive at the post office and you have a concern about is there going to be any issue that happens with this in transit? What happens if USPS destroys my package? If it gets lost, right? When these sales happen, same thing. Trying to claim insurance, very, very difficult. As a business, it's much easier because you do have business policies that will cover your inventory, that will cover your goods, cover your assets. When you do register as a business for an individual, it becomes much, much harder. There's an upper limit to how much you can secure your items, right? You can have a gun safe, for example, and you can put your graded cards, your sealed booster boxes, your valuable items inside, but there's an upper level to how much that guarantees in the event of a fire. Is it likely that someone will steal your gun safe? No. That's why a gun safe is used. I know a lot of people who put their collections inside the little itty bitty safes. Those safes are still a problem, right? The easiest thing is if your house is going to get robbed, people can just pick up the safe and leave with it. So you want a safe that's heavy. You want a safe that can be bolted down into the foundation, into the floor, into the wall, so that people can't just remove the safe. That being said, right, you still deal with fire, you still deal with heat. You have safes that are fireproof, that are heat-proof, but the reality situation is those safes aren't meant to store whatever is inside for a long period of time. If it's burning, a lot of those safes, the plastic on most sealed graded cards, the PSA cases, BGS cases, even in extreme heat, even with the fireproof safe, those safes will melt. Or the paper, it'll just eventually catch on fire if it's hot enough. You also run the risk of the safes aren't completely waterproof, right? If they're trying to put out the fire at your house and then they spray it with water, right? If it's not completely sealed, which most of the time they aren't, right? If they're going to spray it with water, you're going to risk getting water damage on your cards now. So there are some issues with that. That's something I'll probably go more into detail in a later episode. Because insuring your collections, that's something that people have had more and more concern about over the years. It's something that's become a more popular topic because now people start having assets and collections and some of the things that they're holding on to that are worth a lot of money. It's very, very easy. A lot of people who do choose to pimp out their EDH deck, for example, they're really spending a lot of money on it, and then people wonder how can they insure us in the event that something happens. Something I'll review in a later episode. When you have a business and you're able to properly account for all your collectibles, all your assets, all your goods, then it becomes much, much easier to get an insurance policy for that. So that's another major benefit of having a business, of having an LLC versus not, is getting a stable, solid insurance policy for whatever you're trying to insure. So that more or less covers a lot of the topics I did want to talk about regarding a business. Again, very, very elementary stuff, very, very basic stuff. Whatever you do, make sure you're seeking out the advice of a professional regarding your taxes. Seek out the advice of a licensed tax professional, someone whose job it is to do this for you. Use an accountant who is reputable, who's done this for a long time. I know that some people who do this, getting an account is a little bit difficult. In my experience, I would ask your game store, I would ask people who sell professionally on TCG Player who they use as their account. That's how I discovered my current account. I will use him because he also does accounting for different game stores as well. It's a little bit difficult when you're trying to get in to try and find an account who understands the premise of a game store, of how it works, of a TCG business. It's something that they're not familiar with. To be perfectly honest, I went to a few accounts in the area when I first started out. When I was trying to find an account, some of the people just did not understand the nature of the business, of what trading cards were. Why is this person trying to start a business around trading cards? Like, what's going on? They didn't understand it at all, so it made it really, really hard for me to want to use them. So it's important, again, that you find an account who understands what you're trying to do. They'll be able to answer your questions. They'll be able to help you every step along the way for your business. Because again, at the end, when it comes down to paying your taxes, that's not something you want to mess around with. I've heard reports of stores that have gone under as a result of owing back taxes to the IRS, not being able to keep up on their taxes properly, not keeping their accounting in order. They were audited, they found out that they were non-compliant, right? And that just created a huge problem for their business down the line. This is something that you want to avoid. So do things by the book, do things properly, get the advice of a tax professional. They are there to help you out, assuming you got one who understands what you're trying to do. And they will help you long term. And this is a very good relationship to have. This is something that you want to do. This is something you want to do by the book. This is not something that you should cut corners, you should mess around with. And if you're serious about doing this, that really should be the first step. And then, again, register an LLC. This is something you look up with your state. Go to your state's government website. Look it up. It'll walk you through exactly what you need to form LLC and how to get going. Those are two pieces of advice I can really give to people who want to get started. Other things, right, like the PayPal thing, that kind of comes afterwards. Until you get going, wouldn't be too concerned about it. Again, first two steps is form an LLC and then get an account. Those are the first two steps that any small business should be doing before they really get started, before they get too involved into the thick of things. Because the last thing you want to do is you don't want to be getting into it, you don't want to be getting into the thick of it, and then you have to start backtracking and then trying to figure out, what am I doing here? Like, what are the correct steps? Did I do things correctly when I first started 6 months ago? Because when you're trying to backpedal, then you open yourself up to potential for more problems. More problems means more holes in your account. More holes in your account means you're more likely to get audited, right? All these things are problematic, so you want to do things right from the start. And that's really, really the good cornerstones, good basis for building a solid small business and if this is something that you're looking for to become your profession, something that you want to do long term, these are things that you should take into account from the very start instead of trying to deal with it down the line. So enough on that. We'll say one last time, seek the advice of a tax professional. What I'm saying is my experience. This is my perspective. What works for me may not work for you. You have to find out what's best for you and your business. And the only way you can really do so is seeking the advice of a tax professional. I do not want to be liable. You obviously don't come to me and say, I heard this thing on YouTube that some guy on the internet said. Don't do that. Please get the advice of a tax professional. So moving on. Yesterday, I talked a bit about Legos. This was something that people had asked me about. I posted the Lego set that I showed on stream yesterday, the Porsche 911 Technic set. I posted that for sale. And I explained, I was upfront, Legos are a poor investment. I did get some questions as a result. A lot of people were wondering what was going on there. So that was something that I did want to tap in and kind of go over a little bit more. A lot of people did seem interested about it. I know that there's probably some level of overlap. Legos, pretty ubiquitous. A lot of us probably have, almost with certainty, played with Legos at some point in our life. As a kid, maybe you still like Legos as an adult, what have you. So I'm going to touch a little bit more about it. So to put things into context, Lego is a big deal, right? We all know this. All of us are familiar with Legos. It's very synonymous, right? Like when most of us think of Legos, right, we literally think of these like plastic things, right? The 2x4 brick, a very, very iconic brick, kind of a staple in most builds, most sets, right? That's kind of what we think about Legos, right? We think about like kind of big, cool, elaborate setups of being able to turn pieces of plastic into something much bigger that we recognize. You've all seen like very, very cool Lego projects over the years, right? I've like the Lego store, Lego World, right? Amusement parks, the whole amusement park built around Legos. It's a big deal. Legos have done very well for themselves. They have increased their sales steadily over the years. In 2015, 2016, they had record high levels of sales. Those 2 years, they reported more than $1 billion in revenue, or 1 billion euros, rather. That's more than that at the time. In revenue, those 2 years, those were the best years, to my understanding, that Lego has ever done. In 2015, December 24th, The Telegraph, this is a British newspaper, they published an article saying that Lego is a better investment than shares and gold. Legos, the amount that the Legos have appreciated on the secondary market, actually outpaced gold bullion and investing in the stock market over a long period of time. A few days later, CNBC published a very, very similar article. Is Lego a better investment than gold? They do reference the Telegraph article, December 24th, 2015, December 28th, 2015, if you want to go look up those articles for yourself. The Telegraph, British newspaper, CNBC, US newspaper, something we're familiar with. You can look up these articles online, read, and they'll basically tell you at the time the aftermarket prices on Lego sets, on some of the older Lego sets that had a lot of collectability, the amount that these sets had appreciated over the years actually outpaced the S&P 500, the price of gold, yada yada. They're very interesting reads. They are from 2015, so a little bit dated. But since then, there have been Lego has been something that has been at the forefront of investors' minds. Forbes has written multiple articles about Legos. I believe they actually wrote an article earlier this year about Lego investing, about how well investors are doing. It's worth a read. It gives you a pulse. There is a certain level of notoriety when it comes to IPs when you have Forbes writing about Legos, right? That's like the fact that it's on Forbes' radar at all gives you a pretty good understanding of how big Legos are. Right, that's not really a surprise, right? It's a very, very well-known brand, right? There's, Legos are sold across the world. We're all familiar with it. And the fact that, there was a point in time when Lego investments were doing very well, when they're outperforming traditional shares, when they're outperforming the stock market, when they're outperforming gold, is pretty indicative of the strength of Legos at the time. So that being said, I'd mentioned that I don't do it anymore. In my sales post, I'd said that Legos are a poor investment. And a lot of people were wondering, like, oh, what's going on? If I could elaborate on it a bit more. So this is kind of the breakdown, and this is why I don't do it. Again, there are people out there that will invest in Legos, that do very well with Legos. You can still make money on Legos. That's not something I'm disputing at all. I just don't think it makes sense for me. This is not something I would do. Maybe you will have success with it after you listen to this video. If you look on YouTube, there are people who are investors in Legos that do very well. They have good sales. They're able to turn over profit, and that's great. I'm happy for them. I think, again, I'm not discounting the fact that Legos are still an investment. You can still buy them. You can still do well with them. There are other places I would put my money right now as an asset of things that I want to put money into. Legos is just not for me. You may have better luck than I do. If that's something you want to pursue, more power to you. I don't doubt that there will be people that will be successful doing this. Again, not for me. So one of the premises is, why don't I do it? So there's some parts to this. So 2016 was Lego's best year ever. I think they reported roughly 1.2 billion euros in sales. You can look this up online. This is public data. You can look it up and see for yourself. And you actually see for a very long time, starting at the beginning of 2010, each year Lego was doing better and better and better and better. And then 2016, they hit their high. 2015, 2016, they hit their high. And then 2017, they actually regressed a fairly substantial amount. We're talking like a drop revenue of like 18 to 20% or so, give or take. And the reason for this, and this was roughly the time when I stopped doing this as well, is that Lego, the way the Lego works is they have a direct to customer model, right? So the analog is when we think about something like a movie, for example, right? Whenever a company, Universal Studios, whatever, what have you, when they produce a movie, they don't make it available. It doesn't go straight to the audience right away. They first show it in theaters for a period of time before it becomes available via digital download, Blu-ray, stream, what have you, before people are able to buy it for themselves for their own viewing purposes. They give a chance for movie theaters to be able to show it. So that is the most conventional model, right? We see this with Magic, we see this Pokemon, right? Like Magic the Gathering, they don't sell direct to the customer, short of Secret Lair, right? That exception, that is an exception, right? But for the most part, you go through their distributor channels. You Wizards of the Coast will sell directly to the distributor. Distributor will sell to your local game store, your retail outlet, Target, Walmart, what have you. And then from there, as a consumer, you go to Target, Walmart, your local game store, online or TCG player, and you buy from those people. Lego attempts to circumvent this entirely. If you go to the Lego store, if you go to lego.com online, you're basically buying direct. Yes, Target, Walmart, they do stock Legos. More for the most part, you see them at the same price. It's not really cheaper to buy online at the Lego store versus your Walmart or your Target. It's usually the same price. Lego.com actually offers free shipping. In my mind, that's pretty crazy considering how expensive it is to ship Legos. This is one of the things I'll talk a bit more. This is one of the things why I think that investing and selling Legos is kind of hard. But again, direct to customer model, it's very, very different than what we're used to. You can literally just go into Lego store and buy from them, right? That Lego store is not independently owned. They're not franchised out, right? That Lego store is the property of Lego. And again, lego.com online, you can just buy direct from Lego. They'll have it shipped to your door with their packaging, what have you. It's going to be the same price roughly across the board. It doesn't matter if you go into your Walmart. If you look at that price on Walmart, it has Lego online, probably going to be the same price. You're not really going to see that much of a price difference. Legos don't really go on sale that often. That's kind of the nature of their business model. They don't really discount Legos. It's a pretty big deal when you see Legos go on sale. A few years ago, your best shot of getting Legos on sale, as it were, was when Toys R Us was going out of business, for those that still remember that. Probably 2 years ago, I want to say 2017, 2018, when these were going on sale. It was basically Toys R Us, what have you, doing kind of a blanket sale across the board, just discounting everything in store. And that was really when we did see Legos going on sale. Otherwise, you don't really go into Walmart and see Legos 10% off or something. That's just not something that happens. So the direct-to-consumer model, that's something that is very different about Lego. And big part of this is that they actively are trying to control the secondary market. What they don't want is people buying Legos from a distributor and then marking the price up, right? We see this with game stores, right? People buy whatever they pay from the distributor, they have to mark up the price. There's a price markup on that, depending on the price, right? Things are very different. MSRP kind of goes both ways there, right? MSRP on booster boxes is like $144. But none of us actually go out and pay $144 on a booster box because the market has been undercut. People are just slowly undercutting. And now we have an accepted price that booster boxes are $90 to $100. And then of course the flip side on that is something whenever you have something that's much more rare, that's much more limited, right? The Commander Collection Green that's coming out in a few months, right? We already know that there's a huge markup on the premium, on the foil, all foil set. Even on the Commander Collection Green, the non-foil version, there's still markup as well because it is expected to be allocated. So it kind of goes both ways with MSRP. Whereas with Lego, prices are generally very set. They're very enforced. They're going to be the same across the board. You don't really see big discounts of Legos in either direction. And that's a big part due to Lego really trying to curb kind of the secondary market, the aftermarket, the gray market, what have you, on its product. So that does kind of change how the game is being played, right? For the most part, it is very, very hard to be able to be a store or someone who stocks Legos. This is something that we have looked into the past before. It is very, very difficult to do so. One, you need a lot of space, right? Legos are big, boxy sets. In order for you to become a Lego retailer, for the most part, they want to see that you're able to dedicate a lot of retail floor space to Legos. You can't just choose to say, I want to stock Lego Star Wars, right? They want to see you being able to stock their full range of products their full line of products and have some of each offering that Lego has to offer. So that makes it pretty tough to be a Lego retailer. As such, the prices is pretty fixed. The secondary market is where people who are investing are making their money. And this is something that happens as a result of Legos going out of print, and then they retire Legos. If you go on the Lego website, you can actually pull down a tab and you can see sets retiring soon. And this is something I believe they do once a year. Again, I haven't kept track, I haven't kept up on Legos in quite some time. So this is something that I don't actively know about anymore. Again, it may have changed, but when they retire Legos, they're basically saying that these are out of stock, these are no longer in production, right? The set is being retired. And this is something that it'll do steadily over time. They usually retire Legos every so often, and sets will probably be around 1 to 2 years before they retire them. Up until that point, it should be pretty easy to find them. You should be able to go on Lego.com. Some sets are marketed as being hard to find or exclusive. Those are a little bit different. Those generally have more of a premium right away because they generally tend to be in shorter supply. But when sets are retired, usually that's when people see a price jump. And then as slowly as sets tend to sell out over time, usually a lot of people, they do have a deep reserve. I know that there are people that have like 50 to 100 sets on some of these that do hold them, and then they wait basically until the set retires, and then they sell it. Right, we see this phenomena in Magic and Pokemon. It's become a little bit harder, but holding on a sealed product was something that was viable for a long time. As soon as the set rotated, or Wizards or Shooter would announce that, okay, the set is no longer in print, we would see a huge price surge in these boxes and the sealed product, because now people know, okay, I need to buy it now, otherwise I may not be able to do so in the future now that it's out of print. So with Lego, when they retire sets, this is something that people would be aware of. People would usually stock up sets in anticipation of them retiring. They would kind of wait for that 1 to 2 year window. And then when people have a sneaking suspicion, right, they'll start buying it up and holding on to it in anticipation of it retiring. And then that's usually when they sell it. That being said, this is something that is a little iffy. The Ultimate Collector Series, UCS, this is usually kind of the big sets, right? Most of us know UCS via the Lego Star Destroyer, the Super Star Destroyer, the Death Star, the Millennium Falcon, right? These kind of big iconic sets. They're like thousands of pieces. They're big, impressive sets. The boxes are big. They contain a very, very nice manual inside for building it, because it's such an in-depth process when it comes to building. These were things that Lego had slowly released over time. I think the first one was released in like 2002, pretty early in the era. This was something that they released once a year. Usually they were Star Wars associated at the beginning. There have been some Marvel ones. The Avengers has released one, what have you. Most of them are Star Wars, usually kind of the big capital ships, or the more iconic fighters, spaceships, what have you. These were the ones that are released as UCS. So one of the issues I have with retiring, I think this does line up. This may not be the sole reasoning, but we discussed earlier, record high sales, 2015, 2016, excess of 1 billion euros. And then in 2017, they announced that they would be remaking these old UCS sets. And when this happened, I know that there were a lot of people that started to sell out at the time. This is in the aftermath of the Telegraph of CNBC releasing these articles about how Lego's outweighing stocks and gold as an asset, as an investment. And then, because the price is the secondary market, this was probably indicative of a bubble. This is very symptomatic of a bubble when prices were rising so quickly on these premium sets. And then it caused people to eventually want to sell them because prices were rising so high. A lot of the collector sets were fetching very, very high numbers. And then they started in 2017, they went and remade some of these older UCS sets. So most Millennium Falcons that you see nowadays, the ones that you can go in a store that you do see, I think it's like $799.99 at retail. That's a remake of the original UCS set. The original Millennium Falcon that came out, I think in 2007, I want to say, it was quite some time ago. The original box number on that set, 10179, completely crashed in value over a very, very short period of time once they announced that the remake was happening. The remake of the Millennium Falcon 75192 is the newer one for the UCS series. When you see it, it does technically look a little bit better. It is it does contain more pieces. The 75192 is actually the biggest Lego set that they've ever made up to this point. This is something that's still held true. They have done a lot of things. There's like a lot of textural improvements. You have a higher level of granularity, right? When there's more pieces, instead of having a rough edge because two pieces came together like this, you can kind of have a smoother edge if you do four pieces that look like this, for example. That's a very simplified overview, but the 17592, the newer version, it does look better. It does sell for more. But what this caused to happen to the 10179, the original, was that it cratered in value. It was selling quite a bit higher prior to this, and then as soon as they announced this remake happening of the Millennium Falcon, of the update, then it completely caused it to crater in value. A lot of people lost their faith in Lego. There was a huge selling off of Lego in 2017 as a result. And then they've continued to remake a lot of things. There's a new Death Star remake. There's a new Star Wars Star Destroyer remake. All these are basically remakes of the original UCS series from 2000 to 2010 or so. A lot of the original ones quickly crashed in value as a result of the remakes, because why would people really want them when they could just buy a newer version? Did it cost more? Yes, the retail price was higher, but they technically had a higher level of detail. A lot of upgrades were made. There were more pieces, so a lot of people started to just buy the new version instead, and it caused the old ones to lose value very rapidly. To me, that was kind of the selling point. I stopped selling Legos as a result. I didn't really want to hold on to Legos anymore. Yesterday, we kind of discussed about how Legos had pretty low space equity, right? The boxes are big. The Millennium Falcon, if you've ever seen it, it is a large, large box. We're talking the size of like an office printer, a large office printer. Like, it is heavy, it's big, it's bulky. Storing it, really, really not easy. If you're trying to store like 5 of them, for example, one, that's $4,000 in cost. Who knows how long you have to hold on to it for in order for it to increase in value. You can still buy it at retail for places that still have them in stock, $799, $99, right? Just under $800, right? Owning 5 of them, that's $4,000. Who knows how long it's gonna be before you can really earn a profit on that. And then when you ship it, right? If you bought it from Lego, they may have shipped it to you for free, but when you're shipping it, you're obviously going to you're gonna have to pay for shipping, or you're gonna make the seller pay for shipping. And it's a lot of money to ship these big expensive sets, right? The Porsche 911, the one that I was trying to sell, that box weighs 11 pounds, and that box is probably a third of the size of the Millennium Falcon. The Millennium Falcon set. That really just goes to show how big they are. And when I say low space equity, that's really what I mean. When you can consider trading cards, it's easy enough to hold an EDH deck that's $10,000 for if you have it all folded out with premium foils, etc., possibly even more, right? If you're talking about playing with like beta dual lands and what have you, right? Then that cost rises very quickly relative to how big it is. So those points really kind of what cemented like my getting out of Legos. I do stand by that they are a poor investment for me. There very well could be people that do well with them. It's just not in the books for me anymore. I have actually reached out to some people. I would like to have some people that do Lego investing to come on and talk with us about this. And I'm kind of interested to see if I'll get results. That's something that I'll revisit, mainly because a lot of people have asked about this. This is something that people do find interesting. So that's on the line. Again, those were major selling points. Low space equity, it's expensive to ship. And the fact that they basically have indirectly remade retired sets. These are all reasons why I just don't deal with Legos anymore. Again, I don't want to discourage anyone. This is my rationale. This is what makes sense to me. Maybe you're a person that has a lot more space than I do, or they're just looking for a way to offset their hobby by buying extra Legos and then selling them off when they get expensive, and then maybe just keeping one set for themselves that's paid off by selling off the extra Legos. I think that's perfectly fine. I think that's a better approach. I know that's why a lot of people follow MTG Finance, why they do this, because they don't necessarily care about making money. Their goal is just to make the hobby cheaper for themselves, and reducing the costs that it costs them to be building decks, to be keeping up with competitive play. That may be a very valid approach, right? Not every investor is doing this purely for money. I would hope they're not doing it purely for money. Your margin's not super great. It is a little bit rough, especially when you add shipping in there. Shipping really adds up with how expensive it is to ship some of these bigger box sets. Most of them don't fit in flat rate box nicely, like a booster box does. So again, when you're shipping it, you're really starting to pay a premium on the shipping. So keep that in mind. If it's something you're looking to do, I would say go out there and do your research. Don't let me discourage you. This is simply my perspective on why it doesn't work for me. You may have better luck. If you do have better luck, I'm happy for you. There's no reason why, your hobby, your passion can't double as an investment, as an asset, if it makes sense for you. So with that, that'll conclude today's episode. As always, you guys can find me on Twitter at Edwin13. You can find the social media sites for Vermilion on the right. If you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments. I do read them. This episode, again, was inspired. The tax bit, the beginning about starting a business, was inspired by someone who reached out to me on Facebook and actually asked me these, and that was kind of what prompted me to do this episode. So, that said, thank you all for listening. Wherever you are in the world, stay safe. We will not be recording tomorrow. I am actually taking a business trip tomorrow. I'll be out of town for the whole day. We'll be back on Thursday. We'll be back and recording again. So thank you all for